We're here at the Green Door Tavern in River North with Keith Giles and David Chase to talk about the West Loop and the South Loop. Where is it harder to park, in the West Loop or the South Loop? I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing if it's hard to park, but...
Well, I think both neighborhoods, it's probably becoming more difficult to park. However, you know, if you look at the West Loop today, as we're walking our kids to school, we see an influx of people walking from the West Loop downtown. Why? They can park for free. You only have meters going as far west as Morgan, and permit parking hasn't been implemented yet. So
far on both those, right?
So far, and I'm a proponent of bringing in metered and permit parking for predominantly the residents, and shift the commuters into you know, lots downtown or wherever they exist. But you know, I've really never had a problem. First of all, a lot of people who drive the restaurants, they prefer to valet. I do. I'm sure you do. If you can find a spot, great. But the expectation is, do they have valet? I just went to Streeterville at a sushi restaurant last night. There's no valet. I had to park in a structured garage. To me, that's inconvenient. I want valet. I think the majority of people dining in the city, if you're not walking, you're driving, well, valet. Not to get a spot right next to the valet or a block away, great, but if my wife's going to dinner in her high heels, she's not going to want to walk anyway. So I don't know that it's an issue. For all the retail in the South Loop, I've never had a problem parking at Target, never had a problem parking at any major retail. So, and when you buy a home, you buy parking. Now what about guests? Oh, you know, you live in the suburbs and you have 20 people over your house. That's how long of a line you have of parking up and down the street. You know, parking's parking. It's an issue.
It's the predominant issue in urban development, is parking. And the city has gone back and forth on this over the years, and it remains an issue in the South Loop, and probably even a bigger issue in the South Loop than the West Loop, because there's more people coming down there, and we're going up higher rather than wider. You know, we are providing visitor parking in our project. We were happy to do so. We're the only ones that are doing that in the South Loop. So it is a problem to park, you know, in most neighborhoods in the South Loop. Although, again, if there's empty lots and, you know, that strip of Wabash, you can usually find parking down there. But again, I prefer to valet, as David does when you go to a restaurant. You know, there's another issue that's is it good for the environment to encourage all this extra parking, everyone driving? And the city, a few years ago, came out with a parking plan which was to discourage developers from building parking. For that very reason, there's encourage people to use public transportation, and because it's good for the environment. It's a much bigger issue than the South Loop versus the West Loop. What's the right ethical thing to do? Do you provide 1.2 parking because the people in the building want to have the suburbanites to be able to come and park there conveniently from the suburbs rather than taking a train down there? So, but it's an overriding issue in any expanding neighborhood. It's an issue, and it will remain an issue.